Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another beautiful connection with one of my mostest favorite people, um,
Yes.
our beautiful Bryce from Esoteric Atlanta. Welcome to Solutions with Aquarius Rising Africa today. And we're going to talk about Tartaria again. Hello, Brycey. How are you?
I'm so good. You're one of my most favorite people too. You and Mornay. Just just love I love our friendship. I love being able to film with you guys and talk about these fun, cool topics. Nothing's too weird to be spoken about, and that's what I love the most. So
Absolutely. That's really amazing. And I'm loving this Tartaria thing. I know I've watched it several times. I know so have you. So it really is. And I must say, every time I watch it, something more
Mhm.
pops through
Yeah.
because it's so much information. And, as we kind of unlocking all those hidden parts of our brain again, it's just like amazing to rediscover. So, yay. Happy
Yes.
40 day.
And this is my favorite chapter. And you're right. I've watched this documentary now so many times. And every time I rewatch it, I pick up on something else I missed the time before. And I want to remind everybody again, like, as far as Tartaria goes, I think everybody researching Tartaria, and we're just doing commentary over other people's research. So I want to, again, like, there are people out there, are channels out there, and I do want to connect with some of these channels when we're done with going through this documentary, because that their whole channel is dedicated to researching Tartaria. And
Yeah.
what's so amazing is that these researchers who have gone so deep into Tartaria, I don't know how they figured this out to begin with, because this information has been so hidden from us, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you
Absolutely.
understand, and it's interesting. I was doing a show with Stephanie a few days ago, and somebody asked about an American, about our ancestors immigrating over to the United States, and that whole story. That if you watch what, like we talked about way back about the incubator babies, and that maybe the
Mm.
settlement of America is not what they told us it was, and that the possibility that the ethnic races of America aren't just native, you blonde haired people, blue eyed people, Asian, that it was more of a melting pot. And it's interesting that what we got in the cards too is that when the all the boats started coming over to America, it looks like that might have been when the mud flood started in Europe. And so they were trying to escape Europe to get to the other country because of the mud.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's
That
another
makes
angle.
sense.
It
That
does,
makes
doesn't it?
absolute sense because why would people be rushing over in such massive quantities or all at the same time? It makes perfect sense
And
that they would have been escaping. Exactly.
they
Wow.
already knew that this continent existed. They already knew, and it looks like that maybe that was from this was just a divination, so take it with a grain of salt. But that when we got that in the cards, it was like, holy shit, this makes perfect sense. That they were
Yeah.
taking a mad rush to get to safety,
Yeah.
because there were mud floods happening, but they didn't realize that they were also going to happen here in the American continent too. And that the
Wow.
whole story of the American continent was going to be manipulated and changed, in this Gog and Magog that we're in right now. And so, and I just, yeah, so all those people who have really done the hard boots on the ground research into Tartaria, my hat is off to them, because I don't even know how they figured it out that our history was BS, and that there was a whole other civilization of peace and tranquility and alchemy, which is what we're going to be kind of focusing on today, which is one of my favorite subjects. I know it's one of Shanti's favorite subjects, and a lot of these topics he covers in this documentary are so scientifically based that I'm just, do you guys, Charlie Brown, the cartoon Charlie Brown? And when the kids are in the classroom and the adults talk, it's like wah 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 wah. When it gets really sciency or really mathy, that's what I hear. I hear the wah wah wah. So not my wheelhouse.
So true.
So
So true. But I think and I'm the same. And I mean, that's what we say. The information is in the documentary. It is really worth the watch for those of you who haven't watched it yet. And I will tell you, I loved watching it. It was so exciting for me. I couldn't watch more than an hour to an hour and a half at a time because there was just so much information. And you kind of have to sit and watch because a lot of the stuff is visual. You need to
yeah,
see what he's talking about. So it was really, really amazing. And as I said, watched it at least a few more times. Still, I mean, there's so much still to get. And as you're saying, Bryce, there's so much scientific stuff there, which I'm really not scientifically minded, guys. So it's in there, but we really just, as we were saying, doing a little bit of a chat that are really interesting and hopefully get your interest peaked so that you can also go and discover what it is you need to be discovering for yourself. So that's very cool. It's amazing. But yay! So today our topic, our chapter is Offerus and the Alchemist, as he calls it, which is absolutely amazing because alchemy is such a topic close to my heart. But you know what we've really been taught through alchemy is when you're looking at the medieval times, and there's a guy called Falconelli, a French alchemist, who was really and if you're looking, I actually wrote it down here. Give me a moment. I just want to see the meaning of his word, the meaning of his name.
Yeah, and they wrote a book they talk about called The Mysteries of the Cathedrals in 1922. And that's another book I actually want to get and read and do a deeper dive into as well with Offerus and the Alchemist, because it's, and we know that they have to tell us the truth in some form. And so, yeah, Falconelli, it's a pseudonym, and you wrote down what it means.
Yes, and the name literally means Vulcan being god of fire, and Eli or El means it's the Canaanite word for God. So pretty much saying the god of fire, God, expressing alchemy, or that word means God. But what has apparently been discovered is that there wasn't no such one person. It was a couple of really masons, etc., that then concocted this whole understanding of alchemy as we currently understand it, which is basically taking base metals and turning them into the highest vibration, which is gold. So they're doing so, and the whole objective is to find an elixir that gives you eternal life. Now, let's not talk that we know they are using it. That's part of their alchemy anyway. But it's not as we currently have been made to understand. That's what it is. Of course, there's alchemy of the spirit, which is the true alchemy. We'll talk about that later. But really what they're saying, and what this guy is saying, is that when you go back and you really start deciphering, looking beyond the Masonic Kabbalah and stuff that Falconelli was working with, you then start finding the true roots of alchemy. Again, they've taken everything that has been created from a God-given force, and they have emulated it and turned it into something which is close but no cigar. And that's the whole thing. It's that slight distortion which creates the huge deception. So that therein is the deception in itself. So we're going back to the ancient alchemy.
And that's what, and I want to remind people that if you even think of basic science of photosynthesis, darkness cannot create anything, only light can. And so everything you see that the Freemasons are talking about originally came from the light, came from the good. Yeah. And part of this Great Awakening, in my opinion, is pulling it back, taking it back, reclaiming it, dusting it off, and understanding how it really worked. And that is what this is why this is my favorite episode in all the episodes he does, is because our ancestors understood as above, so below. They understood the macro was the micro, and the micro was the macro. What's happening inside of you is in nature as well. And I actually wrote this down, and this is something, Shanti, we both have a lot in common, but this is something else, is this idea of sacred geometry. And we know in the yoga practice, in the asana practice, that's what you're working with, is sacred geometry. You know, you're putting your body into shapes to open up different values, different passageways of energy in the body, which is what they were doing with these, what they still do to this day with buildings and structures, is creating this sacred geometry in order to allow energy to flow through. And so again, that's a good example of the macro and the micro with the old buildings, as well as with our bodies. And we're looking at what they took from us. I mean, we've talked about this, Shanti. Like, I believe full-heartedly that there really is no such thing as sickness or disease. The body is only telling you where it's blocked. And so your job is to then go unblock it instead of succumbing to the real sorcery, which is pharmakia, if that makes sense, and not using what is inherently yours, what's inherently in nature too. And yeah, and that's part of the alchemy as well. When you start to understand that idea of using these shapes to move energy, it's like, you know, they make those little contraptions for mice that they put them in, the mazes, to have to find the pathway. That's what energy is doing in your body in these buildings. And that's where we get the idea of free energy is. So imagine that. Imagine if we as young children were taught from a very early age, which you're doing, Shanti, with children, which is unbelievable, how to use your own body and heart and use your own God-given energy. And then you grow up understanding that, then of course you're going to be better prepared to understand how to create buildings in the macro that mirror the way our own human body works, because every object has a living, breathing consciousness to it. And that energy, that's, again, we talked about last time, the ether, that's the God, that's the Holy Spirit. And so it's so common sense once you get it. It's like, how did we not see this before?
Exactly.
I don't think God, in my opinion, God, source creator, does not make things complicated. Right? I feel like source creator is I think Shanti froze.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. There you are. You were very pretty when you froze. You were smiling. So.
Well, that's very good.
Sometimes
very often those freeze moments are very unflattering, right? So it's good to have a freeze moment where you're looking all right.
Yeah. So.
Indeed. Yeah, sorry about that. Carry on, Bryce.
Well, that's really what a lot of this episode was about. When he gets into the story of Offerus and the Alchemist, he starts off talking about the shape, the octagon, the 8-sided shape, which you see in a lot of these old Tartarian buildings. And again, I'm going to encourage everybody out there, regardless of where you live in the world, just go walk through your neighborhood and look at these old buildings. Ignore when they tell you that building was built. Ignore it. It's probably wrong. You know, unless you saw it being built with your own eyes, is probably wrong, you know, and study and look at the way that they've created the shapes of what we would call like a steeple. And he talks about how these domes they were hollowed out. There's a generator of energy that comes up. And if you watch the steeples, whether it's on a church, whether it's on a mosque, once again, just a reminder, in Tartaria, there was no religions. Everybody understood spirituality. It's, you know, there's the great saying that I love, a spiritual person is a person who's been to hell and back. Sorry, a religious person is a person who's never seen hell. A spiritual person is a person who's been to hell and back. In Tartaria, though, they didn't need religion because there were no secrets. They put everything on the walls. There was no censorship. And so everybody understood God in a very equal way. And so when we're talking about the cathedrals and the mosque and the temples, that's not what they were called in Tartaria. That's just what we call them. And how beautiful is that? You know, you look at like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, which are the 3 big religions, the Abrahamic religions, that are often battling each other. But wow, like knee slapper, all these mosques, these cathedrals, and these temples were used for the same purpose. And that was to harness energy, the ether, to give it out, to radiate it out to the people. And as these steeples, these buildings go up, they get skinnier and skinnier and skinnier, like an antenna, to send that energy out, which is actually also what the human body does too, as well.
Absolutely. And it's so amazing when we're actually looking at this, because everything in this world is based on alchemy. It really is. Everything is energy. and energy can never be created or destroyed, only ever transferred or transformed. So when we look at that, and we know energy is frequency, sound, and vibration, we are all created from that. So I think when we're looking at a lot of these ancient texts, stories, parables, whatever, we must look deeper than the physical application of it. You know, very often they're going to tell you a story or a parable or something, but we really need to look for the deeper connotations around that. And I think that's when we're looking at deciphering, for example, what the alchemy is, that's what it is. And it's, you know, look, if we're looking at the tale of Offerus and the Alchemist, it really is this giant who wants to serve the most powerful being. And first he serves the devil, and then the devil bows, it tells him in a nutshell that he's good, that the only being he bows down to is Christ because he's scared of him. And then off he goes, and then he starts serving Christ and says, how may I serve? Well, he then meets a hermit, actually. And he says to the hermit, how may I serve Christ? And the hermit says he knew that he kind of just had to put him to physical work, you know. And he pretty much, what did he say? He told him to carry people across the river. So because there was a strong river that people were drowning, so every day then Offerus went and carried people across the river. And as the legend goes, is that one night he woke up with a knock at the door, and this child was there wanting to be taken across the river. And Offerus then put him on his shoulders, and halfway through, suddenly the water becomes turbulent, and he gets heavy, and he holds onto a tree, and he says to the child, he says, you know, child, why do you make yourself so heavy? It feels as though I'm carrying the world. So the child responds, let me just get you this. Not only do you carry the world, you carry the one who made the world. I am Christ. Now, when we look at that in physical terms, it might make sense or it might not make sense. But when we, again, looking in the metaphysical terms, so the energetic perspective of that, then we start really decoding what alchemy is, right? And then we start understanding how, on a physical level, these guys actually applied the alchemy because they understood the metaphysical connotation of it, and then they applied it into the physical world as well. So that's where we've got to look beyond. You know, I'm a mystic, okay, and a mystic looks for the unseen. We look at the unseen that creates the seen in the universe, basically. So we study the invisible stuff in the universe, which is amazing. So when we start understanding what that's about, it then starts making sense. I don't know, Bryce, have you got anything to say about that?
Well, one thing, so I wrote this quote from Offerus. They talk about him being of dull mind, that this giant was not the sharpest tool in the shed, which makes me then go back to invert everything, because he was looking to serve the most powerful force in the world. And when he goes on his journey of serving people, it was whenever that person feared another person, he would say, if you fear him, you are not as powerful as him, which that hit me hard. I was like, wow, he's right. If you fear him, you're not as powerful as him. And when the devil tries to derail his gang of demons away from the cross because he fears the Christ, Offerus then goes to the devil, well, if you fear him, you're not as powerful as him. I'm going to go serve the Christ. And the hermit said something that I was saying to you. When Offerus is looking for the Christ, to serve the Christ, he asks the hermit, well, where is the Christ? And the hermit says, the Christ is everywhere. Yeah. He's everywhere. Absolutely. And so what does that mean? And this Offerus becomes what we now call Saint Christopher. If you're a Catholic, you call him. We didn't have saints in the Presbyterian church, so that's a whole different story for a different day. But if we look at this idea of the Christ, and again, we've spoken about this with the idea of Kundalini, and that transmutation of energy throughout you carry that Christ. Yeshua and Magdalene were both the Christ, but they weren't only the Christ. They taught you the true teachings of Yeshua and Magdalene were not to rely on somebody else to save you, but what was to save yourself. because especially if you read Magdalene's gospel goes deeply into what we call yoga the kleshas, which are these obstacles of the ego. And she goes through it to transmute it. How do you transmute this stuff? And that's what the Christ is. It's a consciousness. It's an actual consciousness that comes from that spark of life that happens when the sperm hits the egg. If you don't believe me, you can look up videos. When the sperm hits the egg, a light flashes. That's the Holy Spirit. That's your spirit. That's God's spirit. That's the ether. And that never leaves you. That's always in you. Sometimes it gets buried deep. Sometimes we forget it's there. Sometimes we ignore it. It's not just going to be like open sesame, boom, I've got the Christ conscious, my Kundalini has risen. It takes work. It takes moving through all of that's why before we cover the chakra system.
But isn't that, sorry to chime in here, again, when we're looking at deciphering the whole Offerus thing, because they go to great lengths to explain that he's a dull-minded giant. Okay, so let's look at that just in earthly human terms. What's that saying? And of course, inwardly, he knew he wanted to serve the most powerful being, and originally that was the devil or Satan. And then once he had understood that the Christ light or the Christ consciousness is a lot more powerful than that, he went on then to serve that. So that kind of also explains our human journey, right? Mm-hmm. We start off on this planet in a what I always call the meat suit, so which is very dense compared to spirit, right? Because the body is the manifestation of spirit. It is the spirit in physical form in third dimension. Mm-hmm. So we battle to, and that's why it's so important to get to know the different parts of the body, because through that you understand how it works and our spirit speaks to you. So then he understood, once he then had gone through that journey of serving the Satan or serving the physical, serving the deception, okay, that being stronger and more powerful, so to speak, is actually more forceful, which we often think on earth terms, then moves on to serve Christ, okay, unknowingly, right? Unknowingly. So then he carries that, and eventually, because afterwards it says, once he got Christ on his shoulders, and Christ said, now I baptize you in the name of the Father, myself, and the Holy Spirit. Your name is now Christopher, the bearer of Christ, the bearer of truth, the Christ consciousness, in other words. So you've understood your full journey. You can't move to full consciousness unless you've understood the negative as well. So I will say, and I'm going to put my head on a block and say, all of us have served the Dark Lord at some part in our incarnations. So when we start judging all of these things about other people, let's just think again, because that's part of the journey of understanding the full Christ consciousness. And that's when we're looking at the yin and the yang, okay? Light and dark, yin and yang, there's that balance. And how do we know who we are unless we've really experienced both aspects of what God has to offer? Because everything comes from God, including Lucifer or the shadowy ones or the dense matter.
And I'm sorry, guys, this chair keeps squeaking, so I'm sorry if that's picking up on the camera. But I was actually just talking with Stephanie. I'm still at Stephanie's house. We were talking about this morning, and I used to be a huge fan, or I guess I still am, of the franchise American Horror Story, because I like weird, macabre stories. And season 8 of American Horror Story is called Apocalypse. And if you go back and watch it, it's a deep state franchise for sure. They were basically going through everything that's happening to us right now. But the very interesting thing about this show is that you get to know the character of the Antichrist. And I was saying to Stephanie, isn't it interesting, because they show his whole life journey, and you actually have empathy for him in the show. You actually feel for him. And the whole show is basically, the apocalypse is basically one coven of witches against another coven. It's spiritual people duking it out. It's spiritual warfare. And Stephanie and I were chit-chatting, and it's like, Lucifer, if the aspect of Lucifer is played properly, and I'm not talking about, don't twist our words, I'm not talking about what these people do on these islands. I'm talking about your own internal struggle with the ego, with the darkness. And I have Abby out here. She might be joining us on the dog might be joining us on screen soon. She literally just opened the door by herself and came out. If you lean into your darkness, if you lean into your shadow side, that's where you can find that friction of that match that strikes. You know, you can't get that light on that match unless you actually go for the strike. You know, and again, please don't twist our words. I'm not saying go out there and do what these at all. Do not do what these. That's diabolical. But when you actually understand that you need that friction, that's again in the yoga practice. A lot of the asana work is creating friction in the body to open something, to open up. And that friction is always coming from the mind anyway. The body is just doing what the mind tells it to do. Right. Yeah. It's just replaying what the mind is saying. And even with, I think, you know, I talk about the sperm hitting the egg, creating that light, but then that light is harvested and creates the baby in the womb. And the womb is total darkness. So even that human light that was started by that spark of life is now creating itself in darkness. When you take the seed of a plant that was created by the light and you're burying it in the mud, in that mud is darkness. And eventually that seed comes up into its full potential as a plant. Everything okay?
We've just been told we're demonic.
Well, of course. I get told that every day. Have fun with your programming. Have fun with your MK Ultra programming. This is just science.
Okay.
I get told that every day. And the funny thing is I have such a strong relationship with God. It just makes me laugh. So
it's
and your own Bible tells you judge not lest ye be judged. So God bless.
Anyway, it's just interesting. And you know, it is so true, because really without the light, without the darkness or pain or some kind of suffering, okay, how do you know who you are unless you know what you're not?
Yeah.
And that is, and I do believe that is why Lucifer has domain over the earth. Because we come here to experience the shadow aspect of who we are, the lead. When we look at alchemy on a spiritual level, we're looking at the lead of the soul, okay, which is your unhealed parts or the misunderstood parts of who you are. So it would be your fear, your pain, your suffering. And you know, Lucifer would actually depict that. So again, do we say that you've now got to go out and do what Lucifer's doing and do all? Absolutely not.
No.
Understand that Lucifer is a mirror for your fear, your greed, your poverty consciousness. Those energies will push all those buttons inside of you. It'll make you realize you're either going to succumb to that, and when you do, that energy is going to suck you in. And oh boy, that's when that has control over you. Or you go, nah, not hitting home for me at all. I'm a creative being. I'm an empowered being. I create for myself. Thank you. I'm out of here. Zip. And then your frequency. And that's when the gold, you see, Lucifer is lead. God is gold. LL. Lucia, you know, lead transmutes into gold. When Offerus comes back full circle, he has served both gods, so to speak. He comes back full circle and understand that the power that resides within, ultimately, right? Which is our human journey.
Exactly. And guys, like when we say lean into the darkness, we're not at all talking about or condoning what the Lucys do at all. I can't even handle watching a tree get cut down. Like that, it makes me sad to watch a tree get cut down. I don't eat meat because I love animals. Like there are self-governors. We're not talking about psychopaths. And I'll use myself as an example of leaning into the shadow work, the wounded part of yourself. For most of my 20s, or actually up until my early 30s, every man I dated was abusive. Mostly just emotionally. And I never healed that part of me. I ignored it. I ignored that darkness within me that was attracting that until I got to the point where I almost lost my life one night, where I was strangled one night. And if it wasn't for the fact that the dog that we had at the time if that dog didn't shit on the floor when it happened, because the dog went to the bathroom on the floor because he was scared, I was dropped out of the stranglehold, and I called 911 at that point, which is I know different countries different, but 911 in the United States is our emergency number. And that extreme, I had to get to the point of, I was ignoring my own work so much that it got me to the point where the universe was like, you either shit or get off the pot. And even though that happened to me, and I do have CP, I do have complex post-traumatic stress, absolutely. But I would never change it for the world, because then I went through trauma therapy. Then I went through all these steps to heal myself, to lean into that. What do you do when you go to therapy most times? If it's a good therapist, you're leaning into your own shadow side, that own friction within you that you don't want to look at. You know, a lot of times what's happening now to ignore the shadow side, I just posted about this on Twitter a few days ago, is this idea of toxic positivity, where we see that a lot in churches. You see this a lot in all religions.
That's the new age stuff that I think people get confused with. You know, it's the toxic, as you say, the toxic positivity, where it's all just love and light, and don't look at anything that's not that's going to tempt you or do whatever. That's not what life is about. We tempt it all the time.
That's not true spirituality. You know, people will say, like, if you have a recurring thought, negative thought come up, and they're like, oh, just change, just don't change, think about something else, just make it positive. Well, that recurring thought is coming up. That means there's something in you bubbling up that needs to be addressed and needs to be looked at and unpacked in a healthy way. And that whether that be through yoga, through Reiki, through trauma therapy, a healthy way to then to take that energy of darkness, as Shanti says, and transmute it. When I look at that one, I mean, there's been a lot of examples in my life, but I'll use that one extreme example where I was the one, when we look at these patterns in our life, especially that example I use, I was the one that kept dating. I was the common denominator. So there was a darkness in me, a shadow in me that was magnetizing that in, and I was refusing to actually look at subconsciously until it got to the point where I had to face it. And going through that was awful. It was horrible. I've never cried so much in my life, but I would not change it for the world, because the minute I got it, the minute I figured out that healing process, everything in my life changed. All of a sudden, I had all these people come into my life who weren't manipulative, who weren't abusive, and the people that were just started to take the trash took itself out, because I had changed. I had changed that. I took that lead as a gift. I saw it then as a gift through trauma therapy, through yoga, through everything, and I worked through it. That's the alchemy. That's what we're talking about when we talk about leaning into that shadow side. It has nothing to do with what the Lucys are doing on those islands. Exactly. I think Shanti has proven enough to everybody that she is not in support. That's why she has so many whistleblowers on her channel, to wake people up as to what's horrifically we're talking about everything internal, all those internal things. And that is, and the thing is too, and I know I've said this before, when you start to realize that this friction, these shadow stuff, this darkness that you have in your life, it's not something to be afraid of, but something to work through, because it shows you where the light is. It brings you to that full circle, as Offerus. You see it as a power move. It's a power move that you have that opportunity to heal that, right? And it's not, and I think too sometimes, and I love how he puts Offerus to work, because alchemy is work. You know, there's so many people that treat spirituality as like a vending machine. Like, I'm just going to go pray about it and I'll push a button and there it is. No, it's like, don't ever pray for patience, because God will give you opportunities in your life to learn patience, right? Like, that's the alchemy. You know, and that's what Offerus is talking about. And that's why I recommend on my channel a lot, people do exercise. Like, he had Offerus going back and forth across the river. And I know it's metaphoric, I get that, but getting things moving, getting that moving so that things can be presented to you. It's like that dam, that will that's moving that water through and through.
And the water, if we just think of water as well, water is emotions, right? So when he carries the Christ to the center of the river, that's when the waters start becoming turbulent. So you've got to shift those emotions, because the emotions, or the stagnant emotions, the lead, in other words, again, your pain, your fears, that which you've not understood about yourself is stored in the cells of the body like lead, which ultimately creates the heaviness,
Yep.
the dull-mindedness, the
Yep.
illness, the pain, the suffering, okay? So to get that moving, okay, with the emotions, doing the inner work, doing the inner reflection, leaning in, as you say, to your opposition, your polar opposite, okay, and then through that turbulence and through the change, you then receive the Christ consciousness, which at first can seem heavy, because it's trying to get your attention, right? Look at what happened with you. If it was so heavy on your shoulders, you nearly lost your life.
Yep.
And then that moment of clarity. And
Yep.
that's what this is about. Really, it's understanding that.
And how, if people understood this alchemy that he's talking about here, I think we would absolutely get rid of this victim mentality. We would get rid of people not understanding you are the most powerful force in the universe. In the Bible, it says that God made you in his image. That's not talking about your arms and your legs and your eyes and your nose. It's talking about your spirit. That's what that's talking about, is your spirit. And yeah, the body is the Shakti. And Hinduism, it's the Shiva Shakti. Shiva can't exist without the Shakti, and the Shakti can't exist without the Shiva. They have to play out with each other. The spirit and then the body is that representation, that expression of that spirit. And so back what I said a few minutes ago about, I personally, in my own opinion, don't believe there's such thing as really as sickness or disease. It's just your body showing you where your spirit is not, where there's like a clogged pipe, there's a clogged passageway. And it's going, hey, your beautiful body is designed. It's like, I was saying to someone the other day, I don't see people as being fat. I see them as being wounded. When I see someone's carrying extra weight somewhere, that's a wound. And your beautiful body is communicating that to you. And it's got nothing to do with how much you're eating or starving yourself or not eating. It's got something to do with something swollen, something blocked. And it's coming down to that idea of that spirit and that emotion. And what a wonderful, wonderful journey that is for the human being to go on. It's hard. And sometimes when people are right close to that breakthrough is when the anger, the aggression gets the worst. It's like, I think it was Bhagavan Das that spoke about one of his books. The closer you get to annihilating the ego or the false sense of self, the stronger the ego gets, the darker it gets.
Exactly.
And so when you understand that, that's part of the process, that is very natural, then all of a sudden that's when you can move forward, because that's part of it. And that is what is so exciting about us rediscovering this stuff. And I know we talked about on Monday, this concept of like new age. And I'll say it again, at least in my experience in the 15 years that I've been in the yoga industry, not once have I heard one person in this industry refer to it as new age. Not once. It's usually people who are programmed to hate it that call it new age. This is the ancient of sciences. Let's call it what it is. Patanjali, who wrote the Yoga Sutras, was a scientist. He was observing human beings and the way human beings move through life. That's what scientists do, right? They observe and they study. And so that's what this is, guys. It's literally God. And that's one thing I think that the other side of this has done, is try to separate God from science. And we know the science that we have is probably not really science, but the real science is this alchemy. And that is where God is. That's the opportunity that God is. I tell people all the time, your karma, your work, that's your privilege. It was my privilege to go through what I went through with my ex. That was my privilege. Now, at that time, I didn't think it was a privilege, but now that I'm almost 10 years removed from it, what an opportunity. What a gift that was. Because through the healing process, I found so much liberation, because it was that Christ consciousness, that aha moment. And that's what they're talking about here. And I was telling Shanti before we go on, I want to do a deep dive even deeper into Offerus and the Alchemist in this story, because there's so many nuggets of gold here, like literal alchemy, literal nuggets of gold that you can read and know that you are Offerus. You are that giant. That's you. That's you.
Absolutely. There's you. It is you. And it's such an, as we say, it's an understanding of our human experience, and literally what life is about, right? So it's very
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely.
What's also very interesting, when we're looking at on a more physical level, because then we're looking at that being what it is. So then we leave it there for a minute, because that is quite cryptic. I want to just see, and he says, Jesus Christ is the nascent gold, meaning coming into itself. That's what nascent means, coming into itself, which is the beginning. Gold growing into its full potential. So why is the gold growing when we look at it like that? Because it's being carried to its full potential by mercurial waves. So now let's look at that again, just in that way, the mercurial waves. So there are literally different states of energy creating one action or force, rather, if you want to look at it like that. So when we look at Mercury, for example, Mercury is also been demonized a lot by our medical people as bad and poisonous and but also now when you look at how, and I'm looking at more how this planet has been powered by our ancestors. So Mercury is actually very clean. I think 66% of Earth's crust is mercury or pure mercury or something. I can't
It's
think
I
of.
have it written. Yeah, it dissolves all metals except iron.
Yes.
It was used to transmute energy, and so it's already. It's like it's amazing because our ancestors understood that what we have on the earth is what we need, and it was in the earth's crust, and so they used that mercury, and of course mercury has been demonized today.
Yeah, absolutely.
But guess what? It's used in this thing. It talks
Absolutely,
about
yeah.
this thing.
Yeah, the zappity do, most definitely. So, but what they're saying is every metal is poisonous as well. Okay, in fact, in excess. So yet aluminium foil, or you guys say aluminum, or whatever you say.
Aluminum. I actually just told that to Stephanie the other day. I think we're the only country that says aluminum. I was like, other people call this aluminium.
Aluminum, guys, get it right. It's called aluminium, not aluminium. Like what? What are you talking?
And we say Adidas. Other people say Adidas. We say Adidas.
Adidas, yeah.
We say pedophile. Other people say pedophile.
Got to be different, right?
We got to be. We have to be different over in America.
So, but yet things like aluminium, zinc tablets, copper tablets, none of that is, because as long as you're having it in smaller quantities, it is not poisonous. And in fact, what they're saying, and what he's saying, mercury in its pure form is not poisonous, and there are other metals that are a lot more poisonous than mercury. So again, he's alluding to the fact that put the story of Offerus for a moment there, but now we're just looking at the separate energy or entity, Mercury. So that is actually pure, and it is not poisonous, and it's actually a very positive metal. Okay, he says it's important to understand, and it's known, by the way, in the Greek, in the ancient Greek, I think, as silver water.
Yep, I have that here. Yeah.
It's silver water. So it has a great, and also, when you're looking at astrology, Mercury is the god of communication. So Mercury is flying around and communicating between the gods and the planets, right? So Mercury has a fluid, liquid communication type energy to it, which is very, very interesting.
Which is all, it's all pretty lot. All of this was, and I want to say too, I know we've talked about this with the Saturnalian Brotherhood, or the planet of Saturn, which has been used by the dark forces to represent Satan. And I want to reiterate that all of these planets, all of these elements, everything was created by God, by Source Creator. And when we move back into a more golden age, we'll have all these elements, these planets, everything will be moved back to their original template. So if you put Saturn back to its original template, Mercury back to its original template, we're going to be able to find that balance that our ancestors knew. Too much of a good thing is always a bad thing. If you ate just apples for a month straight, you'd be very sick. You know, too much of a good thing. It's so, and I wrote down too here, we're talking about, they use mercury a lot in Chinese medicine. Well, Chinese medicine comes from Ayurveda. Ayurveda comes from India, which comes from the Vedic text. So this is very, very ancient information, older than the Bible, older than any of the written texts we have today. Was in our, collectively, our ancestors, regardless of where you are in the world or what your ethnicity is, collectively, our ancestors understood. Sorry, guys, I have a little co-host here that's being very, moving around a lot, if you can hear. But she knows. She's like, I know all this stuff. Us animals know this stuff. And so if we can learn, and it conducts communication, it conducts energy. They used it you needed mercury to be able to start the transmutation, to start that flow of energy. And that's what our ancestors understood. But then, of course, the Gog and Magog started. So the controllers now want us to fear mercury. Meanwhile, while they're teaching us to fear it, they're putting it in our quote unquote health care. They'll know our health care, which can then turn into poison because it's too much.
It's too much, exactly. So it's given that connotation, right, which is very interesting. So what it is really an electrically conducted liquid. Okay,
I wrote that down too. Yeah,
yeah, which is used in lighthouses. So now again, when we look at the lighthouses, okay, so now but sorry, before we go there, so now we look at, often when we look at Saint Christopher, the way that Saint Christopher is dressed, his robes are often in gray, right? Which would then be depicting the color, the gray or the silver water of mercury, as well as the red. Now, mercury is extracted from cinnabar, which is a red sulfide or sulfur. So there's the red already. So and half of that is often red and gray, and then with the golden Christ on his shoulders, or the golden halo, for example, around his head, which is very, very interesting. So if we look at the lighthouses, right, and we look at the way a lot of the lighthouses are shaped, it's also that octagonal, my mind, I'm sorry, guys, clearly I'm not getting a good flow yet of words today. Octagonal, okay, so which is also the eight sides. So what it's they have a massive lens which really had to spin 24/7. So it was always on bearings or wheels kind of thing. So what they then did, the old lighthouse keepers did, was that they then put these spinning lenses in mercury, and they then discovered that it was going a lot quicker and a lot more fluidly in mercury, because when you add electromagnetic field to mercury, okay, you charge it with an electromagnetic field, it rotates, and depending, it goes in both opposite directions. So suddenly, long story short, and I'm not going to go into all the details unless, Bryce, you have more of that, but they're then finding that mercury is a fantastic, obviously, conductor of everything: electricity, electromagnetic field, etc., right? Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, when we talk about something I thought was interesting, with the lighthouses, and with a lot of people have like clock towers in their hometowns. Those clocks, the clocks and the clock towers were not; those were added later.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, they didn't use the clock. That was a gauge for steam. It was a portion of that contraption that allowed it to come out, and you see that with the lighthouses and with the clock towers. And so, and he showed you
also what they were pointing out, sorry to interrupt again, was the different shapes. If you look at a lot of these lighthouse walls, and they actually have it in there, there's different shapes and built into the wall as well. And what he's saying is these different shapes and things, again, as well as these clock faces, have contained different frequencies, vibrations, etc. So then what they're saying as well is a lighthouse really a lighthouse type thing? They're always at water, okay? And they literally have these massive spinning lenses. So when you see the different shapes and things, you can see they're very intricately made. So powered by mercury with the electricity, with the water, everything. Were they not electronic or electromagnetic storehouses type thing, where they were literally charging the earth with electromagnetic energy? So instead of having electricity and these coal and powerhouses, storage, stay like our delightful ESCOM here, which shuts us down every 5 minutes, power stations for electricity. This was natural in the way that it was produced from God-given energy, using current, using electricity, using minerals, resources, etc., from the earth, okay, and understanding how everything worked together. Because then from there you look at then these big, which the cathedrals and things, right? When you're looking at the top spheres, because he points out as well, the top spheres, the antennas, etc., had some type of cylinder in, which obviously would have been rotating and creating energy as well, right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I was also thinking too last week, we talked, or the last time we covered this, we talked about how all these old buildings had like sculptures of people playing trumpets. How that then you bring the sound in to bring that energy out. It was all designed to give this energy out. And I want to challenge anybody who lives in London, England, just hop on the tube and go look at Big Ben. Just go look at Big Ben. I've been there multiple times. I lived in London for a while. Go look at that Parliament building. I bet once you watch this documentary and see this stuff, it's not going to look like they told you. It's going to start to look a little different. And where is Big Ben located? It's located right by the Thames River.
Exactly. And it's like he's saying, Mercury's role in lens rotation, basically. So perhaps clock faces and all these world towers and things, perhaps they used to, we used also with that with the mercurial thing. Sorry guys, I'm reading very fast, so I'm just catching my words that I've written here. But basically, Mercury's role in lens rotation is, before it was operated to extract ethereal energy, the lenses are very complex. So the history of the lighthouse is very important because it provides evidence of Mercury being present as one basically of the apparatus that is directly inside a polar, I think they call it, which is one of those empty structures. So it's apparent there, present there, which creates the circulation, the movement, along with electromagnetic energy, with the powered by the water as well, and then it creates these storehouses. And a lot of these things were created in gold, by the way. So the pure form of Mercury, so Mercury supports the gold. So a lot of these bell towers and things that they were using were then made from gold. But because gold is then destroyed by Mercury, it had to go through it was the purest form of gold, Mercury rather, that then supports gold to become its natural state, or gives it that birthing state to become whatever it should be, which is amazing. Because I know it probably doesn't make a lot of sense, guys, what I'm saying. Please go watch that if it doesn't make sense to you. I know I'm just running very quickly over here because there's a lot. It's very, very intricate. But it speaks amazingly about how the metals, the forces, electricity, magnetism, water, all of these things create this and literally power the planet.
Yeah.
And lighthouses played a magnificent, exactly. And lighthouses, exactly. And lighthouses played a very important role in that. So they're not just there for lighthouses; they're there as well, to show the ships and things, whatever, for sure. But it's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And I was thinking too. We talked about my hometown. There was a clock tower, but there are 3 rivers in my hometown. So look, just once you see it, you can't unsee it. And once you realize what it's almost like they've left these instruments up almost as a mockery, that God gave you this for free, but we're going to take it from you now.
And that's when because that's when they've separated. They've then used these power stations, what they used to be, which we now see as mosques, churches, all these ornate buildings with these great big towers, domes, and things, as now as religious buildings, which they never were. They were transformers and power stations and all of that. So it's very, very interesting. Highly recommend you guys watch that if you haven't already.
Yeah. You know what I would love to do, Shanti, when we finish this series too, is I would love to do a bigger roundtable with a bunch of people who've watched it and have thoughts on it as well, just to do a general discussion as well.
I was gonna suggest that off air actually today. I wanted to plan that maybe we could do a Patreon actually get together for the Patreons, which is always because our Patreons support us. We just like to be a little bit extra. So
yeah.
Well, we will then. What I was thinking of doing was, and you guys in the comments would be welcome to comment. I think it would be a great idea that we do a little get together, a Zoom get together one weekend, and we can chat about this and have some Patreons join us. Give us your comments. Let's have a chat about it. I think
we have one more chapter to go, correct? Before we're finished with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, but go watch it, guys, because I mean, like, I've watched it. I don't even know how many times I've watched this documentary now, and you're right. Every time I rewatch it, I pick up on something new. So it's like a good wine. It ages. It gets better with age. You know, it just you learn more and more and more and more. And shoot, I would love to find this guy, whoever he is, who's done all this work. If you're watching, contact us.
I actually heard an interview with him the other day where he was saying that there were certain buildings, if I remember correctly, that he went back and he rectified some of the stuff that was. Some of the modern buildings were, some of the buildings he named were more modern and they didn't come from that time. So there's a lot of people who think he's retracted all he said. He hasn't retracted all he said.
And I want to. I know we talked about this. I want to remind people that's a sign of deranged thinking. If you think he's a good researcher. So he went and corrected some of his assumptions on some buildings because he wants to be transparent. He's not taking back everything about Tartaria. That's not it. He's just saying, you know, some of these buildings they're not Tartarian, but these still are. So just because he's corrected doesn't mean it's all, you know, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's what a good that's what the club, the Lucy's have done to us. They put us into this place of deranged black and white thinking. So I respect him even more when he's been able to go back and say, no, this building's actually not Tartarian, but this one still is. It's all the stuff we're talking about with the mercury, with the conductors of energy, with the magnets, with the Christ consciousness. That is all that's the crux of this. And that's the truth behind it. The buildings are just examples of how this works. Right?
Exactly.
Once we figure this out, we can recreate it again. So yeah. So he has not taken back his work. That is not true. He's just corrected a few buildings. That is it. So don't go to that deranged thinking. Black and white thinking is a sign of a mental disorder. So if you find yourself going there, use that alchemy a little deep.
Stop.
Be like, wait a minute, something's going on. I gotta go sit my shit for a moment and figure out why I'm reacting this way. So that's a good option. If you're reacting in a deranged way like that, that is a good opportunity for you to do your own alchemy. So
Indeed. You know, and I'm seeing there's some interesting comments here, which I'm not really going to respond to now. Again, so, but it's really been delightful to talk about this. Definitely my favorite topic. One of them, but probably the favorite, because I've been working with it so long, and it just, you know, it's something that I've understood and how it works. And Christ lives within all of us. Jesus lives within all of us, so to speak, or the Christ consciousness that flowed through Jesus lives within all of us. We are all created in the image of God. You know, so whatever we desire, and yes, I'm talking in a narcissistic way as well. If you want material things, you know, they're available to you. It's very obvious they're available. So you just, you know, you're going to take a certain road and do that. But if you're more absolutely into experiencing the richness of spirit and what that brings, including financial abundance. But the difference is that money is not your master then. You understand you have the ability to create your well-being by being in tune with Christ consciousness or God's energy that flows through you. And you understand that you have the ability to turn frequencies into things. So you therefore manifest. That's what manifestation is. It's not going out and concocting certain and doing witchy things. That's not what it is. It's understanding that God is abundance. God wants us to be abundant human beings, healthy, wealthy, wise in every way. So you then know that, and that joy bubbles from within. And then when it bubbles from within, you align with what you're bubbling with, right? On a physical level as well.
I'm glad you brought this up. I actually brought this up on a show I released this morning about the whole manifestation thing. You know, in the deep yoga, we call it Dharma. And yeah, you're not, if you're sitting there and you're just wishing upon a star for money just to be created for you without you actually putting in the work for it, that is witchy magic. That's not what you're looking for. Is actual dharma. And if it's your dharma, it's your birthright. But you still, that goes down back to the Bhagavad Gita, which is another story that is a representation of yourself. When Arjuna is on the battlefield and he was like, I don't want to have to go kill the people I love. And Krishna pops up and says, toughen up, Buttercup, you're a warrior. This is your dharma. Go cut some heads off, and it gets into this whole idea of a life path, and that there's always abundance there. And it has to be rightfully yours, which when we start taking from others, that's what the Lucy's do. That's why they take the life. That's why they take they manifest what's not theirs. When you're working with proper alchemy, you're going what is rightfully yours anyway. But like a good parent, like a good overseer or teacher, it's not going to be handed to you on a silver platter, because then you wouldn't have the chance to alchemize it yourself. You wouldn't have the privilege of learning how to do that yourself and finding your total God-given consciousness. Are people being bullies in the chat, Shanti?
Yeah, I'm just gonna send someone out here. Bye.
Yep. And if you feel the need to bully us, I would just have, you just need to look at your own faith and see because Shanti and I aren't on Christian channels bullying them.
It's so silly. To me, it's really logical. And this is why I do this, because to me, it's logical. Think about this.
Common sense.
It's practical thinking. Mm-hmm. It's Christ's message. It's Jesus's message made physical. Mm-hmm. It's not about how many Bible verses you read and how many you can memorize. It's about applying that, living that, understanding that abundance is yours, and not in a narcissistic way. That's the opposite. But abundance to give freely to others, to share your heart, to share your wisdom, to share your goods, to share your home, to share your food. Mm-hmm. That's what we're talking about. Abundance of community living, abundance of connection with human beings, animals, nature, each other, God, our creator, Christ. Yeah. That's what it is. It really is.
For sure. So.
And what the true alchemy is, and that's what I'm going to go back, is our true Tartarian forefathers, from what we've seen here, understood that. They then harnessed those energies and then brought them as above, so below, and then matched them with the correct physical properties on Earth, okay? Mercury, cinnabar, gold, which then harnessed electricity, magnetism, which then harnessed energy freely from the universe that fed us all, that gives us all abundance, that gives us all everything that is beautiful, the potential to create. What are we going to do with this free energy? We have the potential to create anything we choose, physically and emotionally. So it's up to us. What the Lucy's did was they took that and they inverted it. They destroyed a lot of what was already there, and they turned it into their own nonsense and their own concoctions, which is limiting, subjective, controlling.
Yeah.
Took it away, made us believe we had to pay. We have to pay. We have to pay. We have
that
to
we
pay.
Are nothing, that we are worthless. But every human being on this life is just as valuable as the next and carries that same God energy that in the Bible, it says God created you in his image. So that is your soul, that is your spirit. And yeah, absolutely. And so, and knowledge is power, knowledge protects, and knowledge is infinite. You never stop learning, but everything you learn gives you more power and gives you and protects you. And so just studying about Tartaria is already putting up that protection so that you don't have to go through the confusion of the Lucies. If you choose to go through that to find your alchemy, that's one thing, but that you can start to take that power back and understand that they tricked you, because you are that powerful. You are that lighthouse. You are that octagon building, transmuting energy. And you're living, breathing, walking version of that ether. And so once you figure that out, once we all figure that out, it's game over for the Lucies. It's game over.
And ether is the connecting force. So we're, you know, and then obviously when you have that all together, it connects everything. And then you become the knowing, the wisdom, the understanding that, oh my goodness, this is how it works. Wow. So amazing. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And we're learning every day.
Yeah.
We really are learning every day. So it's beautiful. Anyway, Honey Bunny, is there anything you'd like to end off with? Because, wow.
I just want everybody to go watch it for themselves, because Tartaria is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back on everything. And I don't know why. I've heard, somebody told me that there is a truther out there who is in the Christian community and is kicking people off of her platform for even bringing up Tartaria, which is confusing to me, because that's the 1,000 years of peace that they speak about in Revelation. That's really good news, because that means we're in Gog and Magog. And if we're in Gog and Magog, then that means we are about to ascend. And that's really good news. So I would ask that even on this side, it's making me very sad when I see truthers who are practicing censorship, just like the other side does. So we have to check ourselves and understand that knowledge is power, knowledge is infinite, and knowledge protects. And just educate yourself. Just watch the documentary. It doesn't mean you have to believe it. Just watch it. Just watch it. It's fascinating.
It's very fascinating. And it really is. And it just, for me, it was like, wow, this is amazing, because there is a way out. For me, this is the way out.
It's the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes. Yes.
Bringing us back. What do you say? Going back to the future. It's bringing us back, but pushing us into the future.
Exactly.
And all this information is in your DNA, because your ancestors were the Tartarians.
Exactly. So all we have to do is awaken to that. And again, how do we do that? By coming off the grid, reconnecting, going back. Let's understand the value of water, understand everything has power, everything has energy. And it really starts with your own feelings and your own emotions. Yeah, about how you feel about yourself, your life, those around you, and your purpose in this life. You have one. We all have one. So thank you. And on that note, I say thank you to each and every one of you for watching our show again. I think we have one left. We might even have two.
I think just one left. I'll look at when we get off and see. Yeah. So next week it might be the final chapter. So that's when the fun really begins, because we can do roundtables. We can talk to other researchers. We can go even deeper into this very interesting topic of Tartaria.
So fun. So let us know in the comment section if you guys would be interested in joining us on something like that. I think it would be amazing. We'll keep you posted, and look forward to seeing you very soon. So God bless you all, everybody. Thank you, thank you for watching. And be cool, be kind, be yogi. What can we say? Cheers. Where is Monet here in the back room?